Have you ever thought about what it's like to work in a startup? Well, from my personal experience, it's a pretty exciting place to be in. If you play by some rules mentioned in this video, you can get access to your big break in the startup world. The best part about working in a startup is getting to work on something new every day with a new challenge. If you're a fresh graduate or don't have any experience in the relevant field, there's nothing to worry about. If you consider yourself a creative individual who's up for new challenges with a will to work hard, then you're watching the right video. So let's sit together and work on your strategy to get hired by a high-quality growing startup. To make things easier, let's divide the video into 3 parts. Before you get an interview, when you get an interview, and after you do the interview. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about what to do before you get an interview. Eric Thomas once said, "All men are created equal. Some just work harder in preseason." Let's learn from this and do some preseason work. Number 1, create a list of startups you like. Having 10 to 100 options give you more freedom and area to work with. But how can you get started with your list? Easy, you can use platforms like Crunchbase and simply filter out a list of startups you'd like to work with based on your interests. The important thing to notice here is if the startup has funding or not. Seed funding means they're starting out, which can be exciting, but also less stable. Series of funding means they're more stable, with more people in the company and more departments set up. And finally, Series B and beyond tells that the startup is very stable and has a large base of employees. Now let's move on to our next step, which is Number 2, finding vacancies. If a startup is already looking for people to work with, then everything becomes a whole lot easier. You can use Google Jobs, LinkedIn, and my favorite Angel List for researching startup job opportunities. Make sure you only apply for job categories that are relevant to your area of interest, which you must have figured out. If not, do that first. Now, start applying for jobs that are matching your skills and interests. Make sure you stick with your startup list when applying for work, because you're already taking a good amount of risk when applying to work at a startup, so the experience should be rewarding to you at the very least. Another secret tip is to use a tool called Hunter. This tool lets you find emails of the decision makers in a company, and then you can reach out to them personally. If done right, it leaves a great impression on employers. Now, moving on to number 3. Take care of these 3 things. These 3 things are your resume, cover letter, and an online blog. In your resume, be sure to highlight your academic and professional experience. Avoid sending the same resume to all startups and tailor each one to a specific company. Next up is your cover letter. In this, you have to talk about why you are the right fit to work in that particular startup. Make sure it fits the job description extremely well. Finally, set up a blog for yourself where you share your ideas, projects, and your views on the industry you want to work in. You can do it for free using sites like medium.com or LinkedIn. It leaves a good impression if you have all these 3 things set up and ready to go. The 4th step is to start applying for the positions. Simple as that. Number 5, post-application preparation. The very first thing to know when applying for a startup job is to understand how that company makes profit. Take your time to understand the business model and try to think of ways you can help the company excel. For example, if you're applying for a marketing position, make sure you update yourself by reading on sites like Moz or Sprout Social, which are popular resources in the industry. Number 6, do some free work if you get an interview. This is called spec work, which is basically unpaid work. What I recommend is to create a 90-day plan to help the company grow with the skills you present on the table. Your plan does not have to be perfect, but it should show the employer that you're willing to go out of your way to bring more value to the table. You can also prepare a competitor's analysis for the company and come up with recommendations that can help them gain an edge over their rivals. Now let's move on to the second part of the video, which is about when you get the interview. The very first thing to do is to showcase that you're a great cultural and professional fit. Maintaining a good culture in the workspace is crucial for any startup, so make sure you come along as a great fit for the organization. Let them know that your values align with theirs. You can say something like, "I noticed on your company's website, you mentioned the importance of loving what the company sells. That really stuck with me because I really resonate with the product and the value it brings to the table." Here are a few things you can do to show that you are a great fit. Firstly, mention a project you started on your own. It can be a website, business, or even the blog we were talking about before. It shows that you don't shy away from taking initiative. Secondly, mention if you've worked in a startup before. It's a big advantage because it shows you're familiar with the challenges. Thirdly, mention what knowledge you have about the particular industry. It demonstrates your ability and skill to perform the required tasks. But always remember, it's not just about technical skills. Make sure you incorporate these points with something that shows why you'll be a great fit for that particular startup. Now, the second thing you need to take care of when you get the interview is to have a great attitude. Showcase your willingness to go the extra mile. Express that you're willing to learn and adapt if you start working with them. Don't just say things like these. Make sure you back them up with actions. You can say things like, "I'm currently working on XYZ to make sure I fit in even better with the organization and have more to offer as we move forward." Things like these will really make you stand out from the rest of the applicants. Number 3, showcase your free work. Earlier, we talked about the spec work. It's the unpaid work that you do before you show up for the interview. I know working for free can be a little controversial, but please hear me out. This is a startup. If you're afraid of doing extra work, then you shouldn't be applying in the first place. The risk is high, and the effort is high, but the rewards are also high if you can follow the rules. Also, creating a 90-day action plan for free won't require a significant amount of work. But one thing I can assure you is that it will 100% set you apart from the rest of the applicants. Now, you can decide if it's worth it or not. The next and an important step is to ask questions after the interview. Remember, don't just ask basic questions anyone can ask. Instead, ask something thoughtful regarding the position you're applying for. Here are a few questions you can ask. You can screenshot this list to assist you in your upcoming interviews. Now the last thing when you get the interview is to wait for them to offer the salary. Salary negotiation is tricky, but there are some basic rules you can follow. For instance, the first person to name a specific number generally loses. If you don't know what to expect from your position, you can go to websites like PayScale and Glassdoor to get an idea. If you have the required expertise, don't shy away from putting a number that is in the upper spectrum, and if you are inexperienced, start from the lower part of the spectrum. Let's move on to the third section of the video, things to do after the interview. Well, the very first thing you should do is send a thank you email. Thank them for taking the time to consider your application. It's a small gesture but goes a long way in showing your appreciation and courtesy. The second thing to do is to realize that your initial salary is not your final salary. This is where it pays off to work in a startup. You can start low but exit at the top, unlike working in a big organization. Startup prioritizes their top-tier talent and mostly do anything to keep them within the organization. The last point is to execute the 90-day plan or any spec work you showed during the interview. This is where you get to show that you are an action taker. Startups are fast-paced, where the top players and action takers are highly prized. Once you get it, do anything you can to demonstrate your capabilities effectively and you'll be noticed for sure. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to this new channel that I just created. It will help me a lot in staying consistent. Thanks for watching. See you next time.